The hum of the console filled the quiet living room, broken only by the rhythmic clicks of the controller in my hands. The glow from the television painted the walls in shifting colors, a kind of comfort I'd grown used to on long afternoons when my brother was gone. Ryan had left hours ago, saying he'd be out with friends. I hadn't asked which ones. I figured the house to myself was a luxury I wouldn't waste. Then the front door creaked open. I didn't look up right away, assuming Ryan had come back early. But the footsteps told me otherwise. Slower, heavier, confident. "Didn't know you'd be here alone," a familiar voice said. Marcus, Ryan's best friend. He leaned against the doorway, casual as ever, like he belonged here as much as Ryan did. In a way he did. He'd been around since middle school, hanging out so often that our parents treated him like family. Over time, I'd grown used to the sight of him lounging on our couch, eating from our fridge, teasing Ryan over everything. But with me, Marcus was different, quieter, watchful. I paused the game and set the controller down. "Ryan's out. Should be back later." Marcus nodded like he already knew. He didn't leave, though. Instead, he walked further into the room, his sneakers scuffing softly against the floor. He dropped onto the couch beside me without asking, close enough that the cushion shifted under his weight, tilting me slightly toward him. "You always on this thing?" he asked, nodding toward the TV. I shrugged. "Better than being bored?" He smirked. "Guess so." For a moment, the only sound was the idle background music from the paused game. I tried to focus on the screen, but awareness of him pressed against me louder than anything. His arm brushed the back of the couch, stretching out in a way that almost boxed me in. Marcus had this way of filling space, never loud, but impossible to ignore. He didn't look at me the way Ryan did. With Ryan, it was brotherly, simple. With Marcus, there was weight in his glances, something unreadable that left me restless. I unpaused the game, fingers gripping the controller again. He leaned slightly closer, his shoulder almost touching mine. "Still playing that shooter one?" he asked, his voice lower now like he was speaking only to me. "Yeah," I muttered. Eyes locked on the screen. "Never figured you for the type to stick with one thing," he added. I caught the edge of his grin in my peripheral vision. I didn't respond. My focus faltered, missing a step in the game, and I cursed under my breath. He chuckled softly. "You're too tense, Ethan," Marcus said, his tone almost teasing. "Relax." The way he said my name pulled at me. Different. More deliberate than I was used to hearing it. I shifted on the couch, trying to put an inch of space between us. But the cushion sank again as he leaned back, closing the gap. His knee brushed mine. Light, casual, but enough to send a jolt through me. I told myself it was nothing. Marcus was just like that, laid back, comfortable in anyone's space. But part of me knew better. He didn't act this way around Ryan. The game played on, but I barely registered it. My hands moved on autopilot, my thoughts tangled in the nearness of him. The scent of his cologne lingered. Clean, sharp, not overpowering, but noticeable. "Ryan mentioned you've been keeping to yourself more lately," Marcus said after a while, his voice breaking the silence again. I swallowed. "I guess. You all right?" It sounded genuine, but there was something else beneath it. Concern, maybe. Or curiosity. I nodded without looking at him. "Yeah, fine." He didn't push, though I could feel his gaze lingering. Instead, he shifted again. This time propping one arm along the back of the couch, his hand dangling just behind my shoulders. The casualness of the gesture felt anything but casual. I cleared my throat. "He'll be back soon." Marcus didn't answer right away. He leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that I had to stop pretending to focus on the screen. "Good thing we've got time then." The words hung between us, heavier than they should have been. I finally looked at him. Not at his face, not directly, but at the way his hand tapped lightly against the cushion near me, as though testing the air, waiting for something. The game, the TV, the world outside. Everything faded under the weight of that silence. And for the first time, I realized Ryan being gone wasn't just coincidence. Marcus shifted closer, the couch groaning under the weight of his movement. The hand he had draped along the back of the couch dropped casually, brushing the edge of my shoulder before resting near the cushion. A light touch, almost accidental. Almost. I tightened my grip on the controller, trying to focus on the game. But my character moved awkwardly, reacting a second too slow. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He chuckled softly, the sound low and knowing. "You play better when you're not overthinking," he murmured. His knee pressed against mine again, deliberate this time. I told myself to shift away, to re-establish space, but I didn't. The excuse was simple. The couch was small. There wasn't much room. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wanted to see how far he'd go. The silence between us thickened, charged with something unspoken. His cologne lingered, sharp in the air. The warmth from his body reached me in waves. "You trust me, right?" he asked suddenly. The question made my chest tighten. I turned my head slightly, not enough to meet his eyes, but enough to show I'd heard him. "Why?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. "No reason," he said. "Just wondering." He leaned in, close enough that his arm brushed mine, close enough that I felt the edge of his breath against my skin. My thumb slipped on the controller, and my in-game character stumbled off course, dying with a flash of red across the screen. "Damn it," I muttered. Marcus laughed softly. "You're too distracted." The controller slid from my hands onto the cushion as he reached over, his fingers brushing mine when he picked it up. He didn't start playing. He just held it loosely, turning it over as if it were suddenly more interesting than the game itself. "I've known you a long time," Marcus said finally, his tone thoughtful. "But lately I feel like I'm seeing you differently." My pulse thudded in my ears. The words felt too deliberate, too heavy to ignore. "Differently how?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He shrugged, his shoulder grazing mine again. "Just, not the same way Ryan sees you." The mention of my brother's name cut through the air like a warning, but I didn't move. Instead, I sat frozen, waiting for whatever would come next. Marcus shifted the controller to one hand and used the other to trace a small line along the back of the couch, his fingertip brushing close to my shoulder before retreating. "Testing, teasing." "You ever wonder," he said quietly, "why some things feel wrong, but also feel right at the same time?" I exhaled slowly, my throat dry. "You shouldn't—" But the words caught, unfinished, as his hand slipped lower, brushing the side of my arm. It was gentle, not demanding, but enough to make my heart pound harder. "Maybe I shouldn't," he admitted, "but I can't help it." The controller finally dropped from his hand, landing on the carpet with a dull thud. His now free hand found mine on the cushion. His fingers didn't grip, just rested there, warm, steady, waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. The room seemed to shrink, the silence louder than anything else. His thumb brushed lightly against the back of my hand, a small, careful motion that sent sparks racing through me. "This stays between us," he whispered, his tone carrying a weight of secrecy, of promise. I nodded, though my mind screamed with conflict. Ryan trusted Marcus. I trusted Marcus. And yet, in that moment, trust twisted into something dangerous. He leaned in closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, close enough that the space left between us begged to be closed. Every part of me knew the line we were about to cross couldn't be undone. But the anticipation, the forbidden pull, drowned out every rational thought. Marcus's hand slid higher, his touch firmer now, no longer testing but claiming. My breath hitched. "Trust me," he said again, softer this time. Almost a plea, and against every warning echoing in my head, I did. The distance between us disappeared, the tension breaking into something undeniable. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no faces, no clear image of what happened, only the weight of closeness, the press of warmth, the silence shattered by quickened breaths. For a moment, the world outside that room didn't exist. There was no Ryan, no consequences, no labels, only the rush of something both dangerous and exhilarating, pulling me into the very betrayal I'd always told myself I'd never allow. When it was over, the stillness returned, heavier than before. The game's idle music looped in the background, forgotten. Neither of us moved right away. I stared at the faint glow of the TV, heart racing, knowing that the line had been crossed, and nothing would ever feel the same again. The silence pressed down on us after, heavier than the moment itself. The TV screen shifted through colors as the game idled, its cheerful soundtrack jarringly out of place. My pulse was still erratic, my chest rising and falling faster than it should. Marcus sat close, his hand still brushing mine on the cushion, as if neither of us knew what to do next. I wanted to move, to stand up, to laugh it off, to say it hadn't meant anything, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Marcus broke the quiet first. "You okay?" His voice was lower, careful now. It wasn't the teasing tone he usually carried. It wasn't even the confident way he'd pushed boundaries earlier. This was different, uncertain, as if even he couldn't believe what had just happened. "I don't know," I admitted, my words barely above a whisper. He nodded, not pressing further. His hand lingered, though, steady against mine like he was trying to anchor me. The guilt crept in slowly, not in a wave, but a drip that gathered and spread until it filled the whole room. Ryan's face flashed in my mind, not his actual face, but the thought of him walking in, Seeing what had happened here, realizing that his best friend and his brother had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Marcus seemed to sense the shift in me. He finally pulled his hand back, raking it through his hair instead. "You can't tell him," he said firmly, like it was already a pact. "I wasn't planning to," I said quickly. My voice cracked, betraying the tension sitting in my chest. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I wanted to turn the console off to clear the noise, but I couldn't move. My body felt glued to the couch, every thought tangled in what had just happened. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I shouldn't have." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "But I don't regret it." The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know whether to feel comforted or even more unsettled. I swallowed, my throat dry. "It's wrong." "Yeah," he said quietly. Then, after a beat, "Doesn't mean it didn't feel right. That was the problem." It had felt right. So much so that denying it felt impossible. And yet, the wrongness of it clawed at me with equal strength. We sat there in the thick of it, saying nothing for what felt like forever. The hum of the console, the faint creak of the house settling, even the distant sound of a car outside. All of it seemed amplified against the quiet we kept between us. Finally, Marcus shifted, standing slowly. His presence loomed, but not in the same way as before. He looked restless, uncertain, like he was weighing the same contradictions I was. "I should go," he said. I nodded, though the thought of him leaving twisted something in my chest. I didn't want him to go, not entirely, but I also couldn't stand the weight of him staying. He grabbed his jacket from the armrest and hesitated before slipping it on. "This doesn't have to mean the end of anything. Between us, I mean." The phrasing made my stomach flip. Between us. It acknowledged something I wasn't ready to define, something that only existed in the shadows. I managed a quiet, "I know." He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then headed for the door. The sound of it closing echoed louder than it should have, leaving me alone with the looping game music and my tangled thoughts. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. My body still buzzed with the memory of his touch, but the guilt pressed harder now, settling deep in my chest. Ryan would never know, at least that's what I told myself, but secrets had weight, and this one already felt unbearable. Time slipped by without me noticing, the minutes stretching thin. The console screen dimmed, eventually fading into black. The silence of the room grew even louder. Then I heard it. The sound of keys in the lock. The door creaking open again. Ryan's voice called out casually, "Yo, Ethan, you still here?" My stomach dropped. I sat frozen on the couch, the imprint of Marcus's presence still lingering beside me. As Ryan's footsteps approached, and before I could answer, before I could even think of what to say, I felt the weight of what had just happened settle fully over me. A secret shared with Marcus. A betrayal Ryan would never forgive. A bond that had shifted into something forbidden, something I couldn't undo. When Ryan walked into the room, I forced myself to sit up straighter, masking everything. But Marcus's words still echoed in my head. "Trust me." And I knew from that moment on, nothing in this house would ever feel the same again.